Video P3 shows you how to change fractions into decimals. Again, we're using our triangle. This is the one that we're looking at today, fractions into decimals. It will be very useful if you also have a little look at video A7 because this requires division where you give your answer as a decimal. So if you can't remember how to do that, check out video A7. Okay, let's move on to the first example. Now you should know that 3/4 is the same as 0.75, but we're just going to prove that by using this division method. So what you do is you have to do the top number, which is 3, and you have to divide it by the bottom number, which is 4. Now this is quite strange to set up as a division sum because it's so tempting to put the bigger number underneath the bus stop, but you must remember it's 3 divided by 4. So the 4 actually comes on the outside. That looks very peculiar because you're starting with a bigger number that you're dividing by on the outside. But if you think about it, you are going to get an answer that's less than 1 because 3/4 is worth less than 1. Now when I say how many 4s are there in 3, I know I'm going to get a remainder. And I need to give that remainder as a decimal, so instantly I'm going to put 0.000 on the end in preparation. So here we go. How many 4s are there in 3? There are none. Put my decimal point in. And then I'm going to carry my 3 remainder in front of the next 0. How many 4s in 30? It's 7, and that's with a remainder of 2 because 7 4s make 28. How many 4s are there in 20? It's 5. I've got no remainder left, so I won't be needing that last 0. So 3/4 is the same as 0.75. Let's try the same method with 7/8. Here we go. So we're going to do 7 divided by 8. Be careful with your bus stop. The number you're dividing, the numerator goes underneath. The number you're dividing by, the divisor, is actually going to be 8 and it goes at the beginning. So how many 8s are there in 7? Let's put our decimal points in because we know, decimal places, because we know we're going to get a remainder. How many 8s in 7? It's 0. We expect a 0 because 7/8 is worth less than 1. We have 7 left over. Now you need to know your tables. How many 8s in 70? Well, 8 8s are 64, so I'm going to put my 8 in there. 8 8s are 64. I've got 70, so I've got 6 left over. Let's pop our 6 in there. How many 8s are there in 60? In your 8 times table, the closest you can get without going over 60 is 56. 8 7s are 56, which gives you 4 left over. Let's pop our 4 in there. And finally, how many 8s are there in 40? There are 5. So 7/8 is the same as 0.875. Moving on to the next one. This is an interesting one. 1/3. Okay, so let's do it as a division. 1 divided by 3. Here's my bus stop. Let's put 1 underneath. That's the number I'm dividing. Divided by 3. We're going to put up 3 here. I anticipate a remainder, so I'm going to put my 0s over here. So here we go. Put my decimal point in. How many 3s in 1? You can't do how many 3s in 1. There is 1 left over. How many 3s in 10? Well, it's 3, remainder 1. How many 3s in 10? Well, it's 3, remainder 1. How many 3s in 10? Well, it's 3. Do you kind of get the pattern here? We could carry on with more 0s and we'd be carrying forward our 1s and we'd end up with more and more 3s. When you spot a pattern like this where you notice a number is being repeated, it's called a recurring number. We could write down 0.333333. It'll get very tedious. Instead, what we do is we put our 0 point. The number which recurs, we just write it once and we put a dot above it. And that dot means let's repeat that number forever. So that's the quick way. And we'd say 0.3 recurring. Moving on, this number here is a top-heavy fraction, which means it's worth more than 1. So I would expect an answer not of 0 point, but of 1 point or 2 points or 3 points. I'm definitely going to have a whole number at the beginning. So let's write it first of all. 5 divided by 4. Here's my bus stop. Let's put my 5 underneath and my 4 at the beginning. 5 divided by 4. I think I'm going to get a remainder, so let's put our 0s in and my decimal point. How many 4s in 5? There's 1, and we've got 1 left over, so that goes in front of the next 0. How many 4s in 10? Well, there are 2, That makes 8, so I've got 2 left over. So my 2 goes in front of the next 0. How many 4s in 20? There are 5. I've got no remainder, so I don't need my final 0. So 5 quarters is the same as 1.25. That makes sense, because 4 quarters would make the 1 part of it, and the final quarter would be 0.25. Here we've got a mixed number, where we've got a whole number and a fraction. My advice on that one would be to first of all convert it into an improper fraction. So here we'd have 9 eighths. Then let's do our sum. 9 divided by 8. Here's our bus stop. 9 underneath divided by 8. I'm going to get a remainder, so I'll put down 3 zeros. How many 8s in 9? There's 1. Remainder 1. My 1's going to go in front of the following 0. How many 8s in 10? It's 1 remainder 2. How many 8s in 20? Well, 16 would be the closest I could get, which is 2 lots of 8s, and I'd have 4 left over. How many 8s in 40? I get 5. So my answer would be 1.125.